Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of This is Effing Hard, which is our no BS tech podcast, talking about the challenges of scaling a technology business. Today, I'm joined by James Cuthbertson. James, thank you for joining us. To start, maybe you could tell us a bit about you, where you are now, your role, and
absolutely.
What's going on
Well, delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. As introduced, my name's James Cuthbertson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at a business called Relative Insight. So we are a customer intelligence platform, about 25 people based in London. It's been quite the journey. So where should I start, Lloyd?
Well, before we dive into the business side of things, what I'm always interested to understand is a little bit around how you got to be in tech. And let's go back to school days, and let's understand when you were growing up.
Yeah, okay, cool.
What did you want to do?
Well, if we go all the way back, I'm from an army family, so my dad was in the medics, and so that influence loomed really large in my life. Sort of led to believe that, well, they are, I suppose, but that paramedics and nurses and doctors were the pinnacle of professional excellence, so basically that was. I picked up on that clearly as a child, and I really loved science, was good at science, and so kind of quite early decided that I wanted to, do medicine and be a doctor. I think that as I grew up, I realised that I certainly had some of the attributes to do that, but I was certainly lacking some as well. So I think that it's probably a good thing for myself and society that they didn't transpire. but yeah, that was my goal, and it was nice to have something to. I was so sure about it. Do you know what I mean? It was nice to have that to focus on. Oddly, as a young person, and even though it didn't actually end up happening, it still really served me because it just really focused all of my efforts.
When did you decide that it wasn't for you?
Well, you were not too far away at that time. So basically, I'd finished at Guy's Hospital where I did anatomy. So I ended up doing sciences at uni. Was applying for postgraduate medicine. Managed to secure myself a spot, and then got a entry level role in sales recruitment, and just loved that. Just absolutely thrived in that environment. And it was the credit crunch, and it was a tiny business. We obviously worked together, but Certus it was, and it was quick and dirty in many ways, but just brilliant. And as soon as I started earning money and those paychecks came in, it was the thought of going back into academia and accruing yet more debt was just so hard it was impossible to do. So yeah, there are a number of people in my life that were a little disappointed at the time with that decision. they'll remain nameless on the pod, but yeah, that's how it all rumbled out.
Do you know what though? There's speaking to, as I've had the good fortune over the years to speak to senior leaders and founders in technology and in SaaS. There are so many people who've not necessarily in medicine, but in different areas have gone down that route, largely driven by family interest, I think, of parents being involved, and they all talk about that moment of real disappointment when they told their family and parents, actually, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go and do something else. And there's that horrified, I guess, and also in all honesty, for generations, a generation or two who are older than you and I, a lack of understanding and awareness of what that really means. So when you say you're going to go into recruitment or tech or whatever,
totally
don't know. They just don't know. So no clue. And then it soon gets to unravel and they really understand what you're throwing yourself into. But I, the obviously I knew the background, but it's still good to refresh on it. Maybe growing up, or maybe now, or maybe in the last few years, who do you think has been the
Yeah,
biggest
so I think
influence on your career?
such a huge question, isn't it? Um, I would have to
Yeah.
say before we move on entirely that my parents have always been so amazing and said that they're proud of me, and just having a job in London and stuff like that, they were pretty amazed that I'd managed that, because I was a little bit of a liability as a child. So they were just happy that I was gainfully employed at times. But influences, like I think there were probably like two people that stand out in my early career, which I'll focus on because it's a bit cheesy to talk about current. So I'll go back. And very
Yep.
first ever sales leader I had was a guy called Rob Popham, and I'll say that he was a hugely positive influence on me. And I'll tell you why. It was largely because of his complete belief in what we were doing. He just so forthrightly believed that we were providing an incredible service, and that it would be insane for people
Hmm.
not want to listen to what we had to say. And that's
Yep.
infectious. If you're young and energetic like that, just like gets in your bones really quick. And there's an element of that that I've never lost. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And then I think a bit later on, outside, started out in sales recruitment, and then was lucky enough, sort of fortuitous enough, to find my way into sort of co-founding Pulsar, which is obviously gone on to be an AIM listed business, which is an incredible story. And Francesco's a great friend and is now the CEO of Pulsar. Like, we sort of started that project together, and he's obviously a product guy, but with really strong marketing and design like background and just talent generally. And I think that what I found inspiring about Fran, and do find still inspiring about Fran, is that again, he was sure about the direction of that product. He was sure about how to solve the problem of audience intelligence using social data. And the way that he architected and designed the platform was from a place of absolute confidence. And again, like, it was like
Hmm.
there was a sort of element of like cool, it was really cool to see someone be so sure about what they were doing and be so sure that what we were doing was elite and the the best and the pinnacle of that little space that we were in. And that again, like, just imbued this sense of belief. And I suppose, like, the reason maybe I've called on those two without getting too much navel gazing is because they're probably like, it's confidence. They just have this incredible, lovable confidence, that I think is an incredible it's an incredible value to have. And so, yeah, I would call those two out. Yeah, I mean, there's many more. Like, so Andrew Needham, Ben Hookway, John Lord, also been really big parts of my development. I could probably talk about them all for ages, but if we start with the early ones, then yeah, those would be the
Yeah,
two.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the early ones are
They are. Yeah, they
found
are.
they're foundational, aren't they? I Martin Sutton and I actually did this as a trial to each other, just to see kind of how it sounded, and he asked me that question, and I actually used my father-in-law, as because I've known him for almost 50% of my life, and actually when I met him, I was actually just joined Certus, and still what, mid 20s. I was 25. I really had no idea what I was doing, but there was a lot that he taught me, knowingly and unknowingly, that just was foundational for me. That same thing. There's been other people through the years who've taught me loads and inspired me, but as an influence, as a continuing influence, even if you may not have contact with those people, anymore,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I
there's
agree.
foundations there, aren't there? So focusing on currents, Actually, yeah, they're definitely focusing on current. I think at Relative Insight, there's been a lot of change, and there's been for a lot of companies over the last few years. But what's been the hardest stage for you over the last few years?
Because of timing, um, I started out in recruitment during a fairly crappy economic climate. And so that was kind of cool in a
Mm-hmm.
way because my expectations were low because it was my first role and I was sort of forged in fire. It
Mm-hmm.
was the hardest it could have been. People laughing
Yeah,
down the phone at me when I was asking if they were
yeah.
recruiting salespeople, asking if I was literally like doing a prank call or whatever. Um, but that wasn't hard because it wasn't. I didn't have a delta. I wasn't comparing it to anything. Going to Pulsar, tech
Mm-hmm.
booms starting to happen in London and elsewhere, and we just roared away and had loads of things wrong, some things like really, really right. And in spite of that, we grew. It was great fun. We were young. Um, as I said, made a lot of mistakes, but had great fun doing it, and just built like quite a big business in spite of not having everything planned out and having done it before at all. In fact, having done none of it before mostly. Um, so that feels great, like it's almost like you build a sort of fellowship, friendship, whatever you want to call it. These words are divisive, whichever ones you use, but like a
Mm-hmm.
big group of people that are all like engaged both culturally and professionally, and it's everyone sort of in it together, and that feels awesome. And everyone loves
Mm-hmm.
you, and you love them back. It's great. And then the
Yeah,
Pulsar story came to an end, access intelligence, etc. And that's when I sort of came over to Relative to start this almost from scratch again. And again, first 3 years of Relative, same story, rinse and repeat, fewer mistakes, growing like mad, like bigger and bigger offices and bigger teams, and everything felt great again and like really good ethos. And then everything changed, right? So COVID, AI, economic downturn, tech market massive wobble, sort of not in that order, but roughly in that sort.
yeah, yeah,
And I'd only
yeah,
ever
yeah,
built stuff. I'd never taken it down. And so taking it down
yeah,
brick by brick, person by person at times, like was honestly it was horrific. And I think that people that know me well realize that
yeah.
it was not a good time at all for me personally. Um, family life
Mm.
suffers, friendships suffer because you don't get time to invest in them because you're just so engaged in trying to make sure that your business doesn't die and trying to do the very best you can by the people that you feel like you've let down. Um, and yeah, that sucked like hugely. It turns out building things is fun and taking them down is not.
Yeah. No, look, it's. I thought that would be your answer, but there's an honesty to that I think will. You can't help but just that resonates. I think so many people in our sector and industry have had some really
Yeah, sure.
horrible times over the last few years, and everyone feels that pain in different ways, but
Yeah,
also
sure.
no
Yeah, sure.
one's exempt from it. I don't think either. So, and it's sometimes easy to. I think, to be honest, I think it's sometimes it's easy to, as an employee, look up at the people above you and think, oh, it's okay for them. And like, yeah, I've worked in businesses. We've worked in businesses actually where, when it's been, a tough market or tough challenges, it's okay for them. They'll be okay. But what about me? Um, and actually, you realize as you have more responsibility and you grow something and you have more people who report to you and look
Yeah,
to you, that
a
it's
different
just as
way.
hard.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
hard in a
totally.
different way.
That's a decent way of putting it. There's been, as you say, I don't think there's been many people, in the London tech business of any size that have been sheltered from these challenges over the last few years. And if there are, they're very few and far between. Yeah, and it's just it's
Yep.
been developmentally, it's been huge, but my God, I wish I didn't have to have done it. Do you know what I mean? I've learned a lot about myself and
I
how
mean,
business is
it,
run, and what it means to give bad news as well as good news. And I think that, as sales leaders or commercial leaders, if we're talking about that part, and founders as well, who are generally enthusiastic about the idea that they're pushing forward, and their propensity to want to try and change the world, even in a small way, we all want to give good news. We want to tell people how exciting it is and how great it's going to be. And when you have to say that it's not exciting and it's going to be bad, and that it's not because you're passing on someone else's mandate, it's you've decided that something tough has to happen. Yeah, it's bad. It's not great.
Agreed. To lighten the mood, I know there's lots of things that you've done that have worked insanely well, recently and over the course of the years. But has there been something, a lever that you've pulled that you hadn't done previously, that you've gone, let's try this, and it's just worked better than you ever could have imagined?
There are loads of different things that I would call on, that I could call on here, but there's one that I want to talk about, and it's a little bit geeky. Apologies, but not too geeky. So it's basically, in our world, in analytics, which is my bag, for a long time we've obsessed about getting people to use our stuff to do things. Obviously that sounds really basic, but hey person, wouldn't it be cool if you log in and do some stuff in our platform to get some answers?
Yeah.
When we, during these terrible times that I just referred to, we looked inwardly extremely hard for quite a long time, and we realized that point of view is inherently egotistical and quite selfish. And so what we've done recently is that we've worked to get people the answers without them having to come into our environment and do stuff. And honestly, it's been the simplest thing. It's been email. What we've done is we've automated a lot of our analysis, and we deliver it to senior stakeholders in big enterprises by email. So every Monday morning at 9 a.m., senior person in a big business knows that they're getting our report, short and sweet, in an email. And it turns out everyone loves email. And I think if it hadn't been for the really tough time, probably wouldn't have got there. Probably would have carried on flogging our platform and getting people to try and log in and train them and all that stuff. And so, every cloud, pressure makes diamonds, or whatever cheesy thing you want to say. That's the thing that's really changed our fortunes over the last 18 months.
What have you done that's
so where to start? Yeah, I think that
just to go back into the doom,
I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail, but going back before these challenging times, I'd conflated people and offices with scale. I'd confused those in my mind. Mm-hmm. I thought if I've got a big team with loads of complexity and those are sub teams and managers and offices and physical, I can walk in and see people doing stuff. That means it's, we've scaled in, it's going great. Wrong-o, massive wrong-o, that is. I learned that. And I think that we tried Pulsar, we tried doing New York when we were tiny, and then at Relative Insight, we tried to do Philadelphia when we were too small, and we also had a New York office. And I think that's probably the thing that I've done poorly. And I think that I probably let some really good people down that were in those locations in my teams. And I think if I'd gone back and done it again, the only reason that we had a physical brick and mortar office was because of my sort of preconceived ideas about hard work, about teams, about collaboration that were probably firstly out of date, secondly don't translate into all different markets. Not every market's London. And I think that you need a bit of maturity to understand that if you hire the right people, you have the right process, and you've got the right product, and you talk about it in the right way, and all the stuff that we know, you don't need to enforce your idea of hard work in order to get a great outcome. And I think I've really messed that up a few times. Yeah. That's all right.
The honesty. Thank you. No, look, this is the whole point of it, right? This is what I wanted to get out of these conversations. So, um, yeah, I love the honesty. Part of the reason why Martin and I decided to do this podcast is that there's a lot that you see on LinkedIn, other social media platforms that are can paint the picture wrongly that building a company, our world is technology and software, but building a company full stop is just wonderful, and everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and build something, and that's going to be a just sunshine and rainbows, I think. And the reality is often it's not that. Um, what do you see in a world where there's so much noise and there's so much content out there? What is there something that you see which is just consistently, I guess, or maybe have seen in the past that is just the biggest load of BS that you just like? That is just inaccurate.
Yes, I would say if we frame the question around like what does success mean, like that's obviously like a kind of the question
Yeah,
behind your question, isn't it? It's like when people are out there sending a message about what they think good is, like everyone's good is different. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So like I think that is your
mm,
good having a really balanced life and spending loads of time with friends and family, or is your good earning a big pile of money, or is your good traveling the world with your job, or what is your good, and therefore what are you solving for?
mm,
And so I think that
yeah,
when people attempt to project like the sort of almost the bog standard SaaS good, which is loads of people, loads of socials, that kind of, do you know what I mean? Like that may
yeah,
be good for some people and also may work, like, but it isn't
yeah,
universally good or even interesting or appropriate for the majority of the people that work in, if we stick with technology. And so I think that like if you are
yeah,
an up and coming entrepreneur, or if you're an up and coming um, leader or manager of people, or someone who's running a business, it can be alluring to try and recreate some of that nonsense that you see on LinkedIn. But actually, I think that it's important to maybe, if you're looking for advice and guidance, is to firstly work out what you're solving for. Like, what do you want? What does success look like for you and your team and your investors or your leadership? And then focus on finding your people, that are doing something similar, and share ideas with them. May seem pretty obvious. Sorry if that's
yeah.
overly prosaic, but
No, I don't think it is though, because I think there's a I don't know if you've read the book. There's a guy called Seth Godin who wrote a book called Tribes, and
yeah, yeah,
that's a
yeah,
big part of it, right? It's about finding your tribe. It's about finding a group of people that, and that's not just within your business. That's outside of your business, and actually that really nicely leads me on to my next question. But um, I think that yeah, finding those people in that environment
because
that
yeah,
help
social.
you
If you think social is the
is
prism
key.
by which we
Um,
are influenced, is what you allude to, that
yeah,
like LinkedIn stands as a proxy for the UK tech market, which is definitely a bad idea. But unfortunately, it's the only one we've got.
yeah,
So you've got some really loud voices in there that are being amplified by other loud voices. It doesn't necessarily mean it's in any way relevant or interesting to you. And it is challenging to find your tribe, but it's worth the work
yeah,
because it pays off.
yeah. No, I agree. I really agree. Actually, I think that's a big personally that's a big learning for me over the last few years of actually for me personally networking with real purpose to find people that I really want to connect with and engage with who aren't necessarily doing what I'm doing. They're doing different things, but just
Yeah,
who I can talk to and share ideas with and bounce. Um, that's been a big thing for me. The As I said, it leads me on well to my next question. When Actually, when times are bad and when times are good, who do you how do you, who do you turn to for help, or how do you kind of process? What's your secret to kind of dealing with the kinds of ups and downs, I guess,
Yes, I think that there's
of
probably a
building a business?
couple of answers to this. As I've kind of explained, basically, I didn't need a lot of this up until the last 3 4 years, because it was generally sunshine and rainbows, and I was just like swanning along, having a great time of it. And actually, I probably could have or should have sought out more development during those times, because I'll be further on now. Yeah, yeah.
I was
If
just going
I'd
to ask you
really
that. Yeah, yeah,
continued
yeah.
to like proactively develop, even though I was getting great results, I'd definitely be better off now. In generally in loads of ways. But I don't know. My personality type is that, like, when things are good, I don't necessarily look inwardly all that much, and so yeah, in the same way that this period has been extremely challenging, I am also partly grateful for it, for the ability for me to have improved as a professional and also as a person in a number of ways, without sounding too cheesy. But getting back to your
Yeah, yeah,
question,
yeah. No, true though.
the one of the things is finding what you like about your job. Like, what gives you, like, what lights you up and makes you feel like buzzing
Yeah.
and excited to do your job. And what I understood is that
Hmm.
I really enjoy building teams, and I really enjoy growing businesses and doing strategy. But actually, underneath that, the thing that, like, gives me, like, the fizzy feeling is closing deals with new customers and also with existing customers. Finding out people's problems and running a really slick deal process, and then getting that win at the end. Like, I think that during the tougher times, like, I went back to that, like, strip it back to it, the basics, empirically, like, what gives you a buzz. And I really rediscovered that about myself, and that made me a better leader, and made me a better manager and coach, made me more relevant in the conversations I was having with my team, because my claws were sharper because I was doing it. So that's
Hmm.
probably, when times have been tougher, it was about getting back to the core things that make you like work,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, yeah. There-
Closing deals. Hey, do you know what though? Do you know what? I mean, obviously, without sharing names, I have spoken to numerous leaders over the last 2 3 years who have said, "Do you know what? I probably would just take an IC role if someone was paying me just about the right base salary. It doesn't need to be what I'm on now, but if I knew that there was the opportunity to earn, I'd take that because I know I can. Like that. That's the thing and that's the root, isn't it? I think that everyone has this. Still, like, one of my frustrations we experienced at Acertus is this: once you get in and you're junior, the way that you progress is you lead people. Like that's how you're going to progress your salary and your earnings and your potential. Um, and it still exists in all sectors. And it's just not right because actually, yeah, you get some wonderful sales leaders who are incredible, but actually, as I've experienced, there are a good chunk who would go, actually,
those
do you
two
know what?
things
I
are
think I'd
really
rather just go
distinct
back to
skill
that.
sets,
But
aren't they? Like
completely,
being a great
completely,
salesperson or account manager or customer success person or even marketeer, like being a great doer of those things, is quite different to managing folk who are doing it. Like, they're not really the same
mm,
thing. And, like, it doesn't mean just because you can do
no,
one, you can
not
do
at
the
all.
other.
Completely. And funnily enough, actually, if you look at what early stage businesses now are craving, demanding, sort of wanting to find is people who have the experience and have been walked the walk,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
just actually want to come back in and really do stuff. Get their hands dirty and do it. That's what they're prioritizing. So, which is
yeah.
why why fractional is a thing because as an example. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. Last question, final question that we always ask everybody is, and we've covered some of this, and it might be that you kind of rehash it slightly, but if you were to leave founders who are looking to try and scale or are currently scaling with one piece of wisdom that you feel isn't necessarily considered or you've particularly learnt over the last few years, what would it be?
Yeah, there's a few things I would answer. I could answer, but I'll choose one as requested. So
Yeah,
no, I'll stick with one. So like
you can have two if you want.
most founders are really smart, right? In one way or another, like academically or
Yeah,
whatever with people. And what they will have done is whatever the thing they've come up with, their product or their service or whatever their business does, they will have worked that all the way through to the end. So this is the problem, and this is what we're going to do to solve it in this way, and then this is how we should be rewarded for that. And what I find really weird is that they don't then do that with their business. What they do is they say like, right, we're just going to like in Bilbo Baggins style, we're just going to walk out the door and see where our feet take us, and just add more people in and take on some money and then add more, see what happens, and then develop the product and hopefully get product market fit and find out who our ICP is and add some more people and add some more stress. And do you know what I mean? And actually, it works way too many times. It shouldn't work as many times as it does, because what I would really recommend is that if you've got a great idea and you're going to build a business, it'd be like, right, this is my end point. I want to sell this business, or I want to do an IPO, or I want to I want whatever. I mean, those are huge pie in the sky. What are you aiming towards in what time frame, and what steps do you need to do to get there? And not very many businesses work like that. They'll plan 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months in advance. But actually, I would really encourage people to say, what is my end goal here? And that comes back to, I want to have a great business where I get to spend a lot of time with my friends and family. I want to earn absolutely heaps of money. This is how much I want to earn. This is how I'm going to do it. Or I want to be a thought leader in this space, and I want to genuinely change the way that people do a thing or in society. Or I want to travel the world with my work. Or I'm making it very simple. What are you trying to do? Because then all the other answers become really clear, and it means your team's going to know what's up and what they're trying to do. Your investors are going to know how to behave and how to interact with you and how to support you. Friends and family are going to get it. Whereas if you're just saying right, let's just crack on with this thing and see how far we can take it, it's all a bit uncertain. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Completely. It's a great final answer. Thank you. Covered loads, as expected. Look, I think we know, and certainly the last few years have taught us that this is not a linear path of growth and success, but the whole point of the podcast is to shine a light
and
on these kind of conversations.
I love the name, and it really spoke to me, because
yeah.
I think that there isn't much out there that isn't just trying to sell the fact that it's sunshine and rainbows, and if you have the right recipe, it's all going to go right. So good on you guys for shining a light on this, so to speak.
James, thank you for being part of the This Is Effing Hard podcast. Cheers. Season 1. Really appreciate it, mate. Thank you.